I remember sitting in an English class thinking, I understand every rule, so why can I still not speak? I had the grammar, I had the vocabulary, years of it. And the moment someone asked me a question in real English, my mind just went completely blank.
The knowledge was there, the language wasn't.
Exactly. And that gap, the gap between knowing English and actually using it, that is what today is about.
Welcome to Honestly English, the podcast where two people have real conversations so you can absorb natural American English without even thinking about it. I'm Ryan.
And I'm Ashley, and today we are going all in on the question that I think almost every intermediate English learner has asked at some point. Why is English so hard to actually speak, even when you already know it?
And we're not just going to give you theory. Ashley and I have both been through moments, real moments, of feeling stuck with language. Not always English specifically, but that experience of hitting a wall in communication and not knowing how to get through it.
And the more people I talk to, the more I realize so many learners reach a really good level. They can read, they can understand, they can write, but speaking still feels scary, still feels like it belongs to someone else.
And there's actually a very specific reason for that. And once you understand it, a lot of things start to make sense.
Let's go.
So before the psychology, Ashley, I want to start with your story, because I know you've talked about feeling genuinely stuck before, not in English, but with language. And I think it maps perfectly to what a lot of our listeners are going through right now.
Yeah, okay. So I was learning Spanish in college, and I was genuinely good. I tested into the advanced class, I could read novels, I could write long essays, and then one day my professor asked me to present something in front of the class. Just 5 minutes, my own research, and I completely froze.
Froze how?
Like, I opened my mouth and nothing came out. Not because I didn't know the words, I knew the words. It was something different, something underneath the words. I was so scared of saying something wrong in front of people that my brain just shut the door. Every word I knew went somewhere I couldn't reach.
Uncomfortably aware of yourself, especially worried about what others think of you. And was that the first time that it happened to you?
With language, yes, and it was genuinely shocking because I had always thought if you study enough, you'll be ready. And that day, I realized studying and being ready are not the same thing at all.
That moment right there, that's the intermediate plateau.
Tell me more about that, because I feel like it has a really specific feeling to it.
It does. The plateau is that place where you're good enough to understand a lot, but not yet comfortable enough to produce language without thinking. You're living in this no man's land between knowing and doing, and it's incredibly frustrating because the effort is real, the progress isn't obvious anymore, and you don't know what to change.
Yes, that is the exact feeling.
I had something similar, not with a second language, but with communication in general. In my early 20s, I had to explain something emotionally complicated to someone I really cared about. And I remember standing there with all these thoughts, all this feeling, and I could not find the words. Not because I didn't know vocabulary. I knew the words. It was something different, something underneath the words. And I think that's very close to what English learners experience when speaking feels hard. It's not a vocabulary problem. It's a safety problem. The language doesn't feel safe yet. It doesn't feel like it belongs to you.
And the worst part, the part no one tells you, is that the hesitation makes it worse. Because once you notice yourself hesitating, you start thinking about the hesitation instead of what you're trying to say. And now you're really stuck.
Stressed about being stressed.
Exactly. It becomes this loop. And the loop is actually one of the main reasons people plateau and stay there.
Right, because the solution to the loop is not more studying. More studying actually reinforces the idea that you're not ready yet.
Oh, say that again. That's important.
The more you study before you speak, the more you train your brain to believe you need to study before you speak. The solution to the loop is not preparation, it's action. Imperfect, uncomfortable, brave action.
Okay, now I want to understand the psychology behind all of this, because I feel like there is something real happening in the brain here, not just nerves.
So there's a concept in language acquisition called the affective filter. It comes from a researcher named Stephen Krashen, and the basic idea is your emotional state acts like a filter on language. When you feel safe, relaxed, motivated, the filter is low. Language gets in, language comes out. When you feel anxious, embarrassed, self-conscious, the filter goes up, and suddenly even the English you know can't get through.
That explains so much because I've heard from people who speak beautiful English in a one-on-one private conversation and completely fall apart in a group setting.
Exactly. In the private conversation, the filter is low. In the group, especially with native speakers or people they want to impress, the filter shoots up. The brain is focused on protection, not language.
Confidence is the key to lowering the filter.
Confidence is part of it, but here's what I want to push back on. Most people think confidence means feeling ready, like one day you'll wake up and feel sure enough to speak. That's not how it works.
Then how does it work?
Real confidence comes from accumulating experience with discomfort. It comes from having been wrong enough times that one more wrong sentence doesn't feel dangerous anymore. You don't build confidence and then speak. You speak badly and bravely, and confidence builds from that.
That is exactly what my Spanish professor eventually told me. She said, the students who improve fastest are not the best students. They're the most willing to be embarrassed.
Which sounds awful and is also completely true.
I want to talk about something else that I think is huge, the difference between input and output, because I feel like a lot of learners are doing a lot of one and almost none of the other.
Yes. So input is everything you receive in English. Listening, reading, watching shows, podcasts. Your brain is absorbing language that comes in.
And input is important.
Input is essential. You cannot speak a language you've never heard. But at the intermediate level, especially B1 to B2, you reach a point where your brain has received a lot of English and needs to start producing it. And that's output.
And most learners avoid output.
Most learners are terrified of output because output is where you can be wrong. Input is safe. You can always just say you didn't understand. Output is vulnerable. Output is where you have to show what you actually have.
And there's another layer to this, too. The kind of input matters, right?
Hugely. A lot of learners have exposure to formal textbook English, which builds a foundation, but then they hear real casual American conversation, contractions, filler words, natural rhythm, and it sounds almost like a different language from what they studied.
I remember my Spanish professor playing us a clip of two native speakers just chatting, casual conversation, and I understood maybe 30% of it. After years of study, I was devastated.
Because spoken casual language is a completely different register from written academic language, and if your ears haven't been trained on real conversation, grammar knowledge doesn't bridge that gap.
So what does bridge it?
Immersion. Real, intentional, daily immersion.
And I know some people hear that word and think, well, I can't move to America. I can't afford that. But that's not what you mean.
Not at all. Immersion is not a passport. It's a decision. It's about how much of your daily thinking, listening, consuming happens in English. You can build immersion in your room, in your city, anywhere, if you're intentional about it.
Intentional means doing something with a clear purpose, on purpose, not by accident. What does that actually look like day to day?
Your phone is in English. The shows you watch, especially the ones you already love, you watch in English without subtitles. You write 3 sentences in English every morning about what's on your mind. You find one person, online or in real life, you commit to speaking English regularly. You think in English on your commute.
Basically, you stop treating English as something you do and start treating it as something you live in.
Exactly. And that shift, from studying English to living in English, that is the moment things start to change.
What is the one thing, the one insight you wish someone had told you earlier about what it actually takes to become fluent?
Pounds. Fluency is not a destination, it's a rhythm. It's a daily habit of engaging with the language, imperfectly, consistently, bravely. The people who become fluent are not the people who studied the hardest in one big push. They're the people who stayed in contact with the language the longest.
Stayed in contact with the language longest.
Consistency beats intensity, every time.
And for me, what I wish someone had told me is that making mistakes is not a sign of failure. It's a sign that your brain is processing. Every wrong sentence is teaching your brain something right. The learners who improve fastest are not the most careful speakers. They're the most willing speakers.
There's research that supports this. Learners who produce higher volumes of output, even with more errors, develop fluency faster than learners who speak carefully but rarely.
Because your brain doesn't learn language by being cautious, it learns by doing.
by doing, and, crucially, by surviving the doing. Every time you say something imperfect in English and the world doesn't end, your brain gets a little braver.
Okay, I want to get genuinely practical now because I think theory is great, but what people actually need is, what do I do today, this week?
Let's go. Tip 1, and this is the foundation of everything else. Stop waiting until you feel ready. Ready never comes. It is not a feeling that arrives on its own. The people who improve are the people who start before they feel prepared. There's a phrase for this. You've got to throw yourself in at the deep end.
I love that phrase. It describes something terrifying and completely correct at the same time. And my version of tip 1 is find one person this week you can speak English with. Just one. Tell them up front, I'm learning, I'm going to make mistakes, just keep talking to me. Most people are so kind when you give them that context.
And that one sentence, I'm learning, it lowers the filter immediately. Because now you don't have to pretend, and pretending is exhausting. Tip 2, upgrade your input. Most intermediate learners listen to English that's just below their level because it feels comfortable. They understand everything, and that feels like progress. But that's actually coasting. Research shows you grow fastest when about 20% of what you hear is slightly above your current level.
So the sweet spot is most of it makes sense, but not all of it. Just enough challenge that your brain has to work.
Exactly. If you understand every single word with no effort, your brain is on autopilot. It's not acquiring anything new.
My version of this tip, and it genuinely helped me, is take a show you already know and love, you know the story, you know the characters, and watch it in English with no subtitles. Because the context carries you through the moments you don't fully catch, and your ear has to do the real work.
The context removes the pressure from comprehension and lets your brain focus on the rhythm, the pace, the way people actually talk.
Tip 4. This one sounds strange, but it works. Talk to yourself in English, out loud. I know how that sounds.
It does sound a little unusual.
It is a little unusual, but it is so effective. Walk around your space, narrate what you're doing, explain your day to absolutely no one, think through a problem out loud in English. You can stop mid-sentence, try a word that doesn't work, try another one. Zero social pressure, full output practice.
And there's a real neurological reason this works. When you say words out loud, physically, with your voice, it activates a different kind of memory than just reading or thinking them. It starts to build something called muscle memory for the language.
The language stops being just in your head. It moves into your body. Your mouth learns the shape of the words. That is real.
Tip 4, get comfortable with approximation. One of the biggest traps for intermediate learners is searching for the exact right word mid-conversation. And while the search is happening, the conversation has moved on. The real skill is not having every word. It's being able to communicate your idea even without the perfect word.
Native speakers do this constantly, by the way. We say things like, you know that feeling when something happens and it already feels familiar? We describe around the word. Nobody expects precision in conversation. They expect communication.
There's an expression for almost having a word. It's on the tip of my tongue. That sensation of reaching for something you almost have. And the move is don't stop. Keep going. Describe what you mean. Work around the gap. The conversation survives.
And honestly, when a learner does that, when they find a workaround instead of freezing, it doesn't look like weakness. It looks like someone who's fully engaged and thinking carefully. That's a skill.
Tip 5, and maybe the most underrated one, find English that you actually care about. Not English you think you should study. English you genuinely want to spend time with.
Oh, this one is everything.
Because when content is emotionally interesting to you, your brain pays a completely different quality of attention. You absorb vocabulary you didn't try to learn. You notice expressions you didn't set out to notice. The language enters through a different door, through interest and feeling, not through effort.
And this is actually why a podcast like this one works. Not because we slow down and explain words, but because the conversation is real and the topics matter to people, and the English just comes with it. That's how it's supposed to happen.
That's the whole idea.
It really is.
So, we've talked about why English is hard to speak even when you know it. We've talked about the plateau, the affective filter, input versus output, immersion, and 5 real things you can do right now to move forward. And I want to close with something personal. Our closing question for you today is, what is the one thing that has helped your English the most, and what is still holding you back?
For me, honestly, the thing that helped most was permission. Giving myself permission to sound imperfect. I had this specific moment where I thought, I am never going to sound like a native speaker. And instead of that being devastating, it was actually freeing because it meant I wasn't failing at being a native speaker. I was succeeding at being someone who communicates across languages. In the moment I stopped trying to sound perfect, I started actually connecting. And what still holds me back, if I'm being completely honest, I still hesitate before conversations where the stakes feel high, before a presentation, before a really important phone call. Old patterns don't disappear, they just get quieter. You learn to walk past them.
For me, the thing that helped most was consistency. Not any breakthrough, not a trip somewhere, or a method, or a course, just staying in contact with the language every single day, even for 10 minutes, even imperfectly. There's something I've come to believe about skill. It's not about how hard you push once, it's about how long you keep showing up gently. And what still holds me back? The same thing it always has, honestly. The question of whether what I'm saying is good enough. That voice doesn't go away. You just practice talking over it until it stops being louder than you.
Tell us your answer in the comments. We read every one.
If today helped you, share it with someone who needs it. New episodes every Tuesday and Friday. See you next week.
And remember, the goal was never perfection. The goal was always connection.